heads nodding, good. We're going to talk a little bit about an overview of policy incentives, and we're going to try and summarize that in around 20 minutes. So we'll move somewhat quick, but I'll try and really focus on what it is that you're the most interested in. So the key points I'd like to hit on are kind of that 30,000 foot view, a general discussion on the trends of renewable energy policy in this country and what it means to alternative energy development. And then we'll transition, focus a little bit more here in Ohio. We'll look at Senate Bill 221, Senate Bill 310, and Ohio's net metering policies. A quick show of hands, how many of you are familiar with Senate Bill 221? Okay, a few. Senate Bill 310? A couple of you. Okay, good. So some of this stuff will be new, and it's important if you're considering investing in energy efficiencies or renewable energies to understand how these policies will impact your projects. So to get started, I want to talk once again about policy at the national level. And it's important to think about policy's role in energy development. So when we think about the energy mix of a region or a territory or a state, energy mix, which sources we use or we gather our energy from, it's influenced by a number of things. It's going to be influenced by the economics. It's going to be influenced by the availability of a resource, right? The technology that's available at the time. And then policy. Policy is a major driver of development. So if we step back a second and think about, okay, what influences policy? Policy doesn't just appear, right? Policy is also influenced. Policy is influenced by economic, environmental, and social factors at the local level, state level, national level, international level. Someone mentioned automotive fleets or cars earlier. That's a good example of these factors influencing policy, right? Think about the automobiles and the fuel efficiency that we have in our cars today compared to that of the 70s. What happened in the 1970s? Were there long lines at gas stations? Yeah, there was a shortage, right? That was a factor that influenced policy. All of a sudden we have fuel efficiency standards. Very similar trends that we see with energy, okay? So the first slide here is in a lot of words, but I do more talking than reading, and we use charts and I wave my arms around, so you don't feel like you have to read all that. I'll summarize it for you. But what we're looking at is a snapshot of renewable energy policies at the national level. And the main premise of the story is Ohio is not alone in the policies that we have. In total, there's 41 U.S. states or territories that have some form of renewable energy mandates or goals. Okay, and we'll get into what those look like when we look at Ohio's. When we look at energy efficiency, 26 states and or territories have some form of energy efficiency policy in place. Net metering, 51 states or territories have net metering rules in place. So this is stuff that's not unique to Ohio. This is happening nationwide, and most of it's driven at the state level. So I claimed earlier policy drives development. This is just kind of an example of what we've seen from those 41 renewable energy policies at the state level. So I'll walk you through this chart here. We're looking at two different things. We're charting in red net excess electrical generation from wind and solar. Okay, so the red line here, this is electricity generation from wind and solar. The gray bars are representing a cumulative total of when states established their renewable energy policy, okay? So in 1990 there was one, that was Iowa. They were early adopters. They set their policies in place in 1983. So there was one in 1990. You see in the mid-90s, then that's when we started to gain some attraction, some development, some activity, late 90s and through the 2000s. And you can see in 2014 now there's 41 states that have that policy. So is there a correlation between policy and development? It appears there is, right? That's what we're seeing. And we see a similar story in Ohio. Now, to put it in perspective, this net electrical generation from wind and solar, it's a drop in the bucket compared to the total electrical generation. But the point is there's a trend. Policy is important to development, and we need to understand it. So let's look at Ohio Senate Bill 221. In 2008, Ohio passed and signed into law Senate Bill 221, which established the state's first alternative energy portfolio standards. It's a mouthful. basically, it's summarized, a lot of people refer to it as 25 by 25. And so the original policy was requiring or mandating our investor-owned utilities, electrical service companies to generate 25% alternative energies by the year 2025. Now, it gets a little bit confusing. That 25% alternative energy is defined in the Ohio Revised Code to include both advanced energy sources and renewable energy sources. Advanced energy sources could be clean coal technologies, third-generation nuclears, those types of development. Renewables, what we're talking about here today, your wind, solar, bioenergy, fuel cell. So at minimum, 12.5% of that 25 needs to come from renewable sources, okay? There we go. So moving forward, looking at Senate Bill 221, it established an annual benchmark to meet those goals, okay? So every year there's a benchmark for renewable energy that needs to be met in order to come out to that 12.5% renewable energy by the year 2025. The other half, once again, could come from advanced sources. So when you look at the renewable part, originally, half of the, and this is how policy, there's all these different layers of the onion you need to keep peeling back and seeing what it means, right? So half of that renewable energy component originally had to come from sources that were physically located within the state of Ohio. The other half could come from neighboring states that certified their facilities through the Ohio Public Utilities Commission. So that's one piece. The other thing is there was what we refer to as a solar carve-out. So not only is there a requirement for renewable energy, there was a specific carve-out mandating that, hey, we need to come up with 0.5% from solar energy by the year 2025. So that's driving a lot of the development on the PV solar side. So to kind of step back once, we talked earlier and showed the chart about the connection between policy and development at the national level. When we look at what's happening here in Ohio, and once again, this is a drop in the bucket when we consider all of the electrical consumers in the state of Ohio. But in 2009, there were 14 certified renewable energy facilities in the state of Ohio. 2008, we passed the law, things got moving. Fast forward to today, as of January this year, there was 1,919 certified renewable energy facilities in the state of Ohio. So the trend is moving upward. Once again, policy in 2008, all of a sudden we start to see the development. So what's the connection? What's the connection between this policy and you investing in a renewable energy system or an energy efficiency project in your home or business? There is a connection, and this is a big piece that we don't. When you look at I do a lot of workshops on financial assessments of renewable energy facilities, specifically in agriculture. And those are typically hour and a half long talks when we get into the financial details. Of the different moving pieces in these projects, renewable energy credits are one of the most difficult ones to wrap your arms around because we're not familiar with them. Senate Bill 221 was mandating renewable energy generation. So what do we need to do? We need to have a means of tracking it, right? We can't just say you need to do it. We need to be able to track it to make sure that we know who's in or out of compliance. And so within this bill, we established a system of renewable energy credits, or essentially a trading market that was created to track who's in or out of compliance of this policy. And it's based on production. So to summarize it, if you have a certified renewable energy facility in the state of Ohio that's certified through the PUCO, for every megawatt hour that your system generates, you're going to generate this thing called a renewable energy credit. And that credit has value because, once again, we were mandating investor-owned utilities and electric service companies to diversify to include 12.5% renewable energy by the year 2025. They can do that in a number of ways. 2 ways, well, we'll say 3, just to kind of simplify it a little bit. So one way would be to actually own a system. So as the owner of a system, that's a long-term approach. They would own the electricity generated. They, as the system owner, would own the renewable energy credits. Another option is to actually purchase the renewable energy credits from other systems. And so that's the value, that's the connection between you investing in your home or business and this policy. Is that renewable energy credit that you would generate and that you would own if you owned a system on your home, that renewable energy credit has value to these utilities. what we've seen is the evolution. We have a number of aggregators and brokers now that serve as middle partners that will acquire renewable energy credits from a number of smaller systems. They can package those and then work with the utilities. Okay, so renewable energy credits, that's an important piece. When we think about Senate Bill 221, there's also standards established for energy efficiency and peak demand reduction. So essentially what they've done is they established a benchmark, and then once they had the benchmark and the baseline, they set annual standards for efficiency reduction targets and then also peak demand targets as well. So policy's fluid. That's the one thing that we need to remember. Policy changes, it's very fluid. Senate Bill 310 came along in 2014 and essentially threw a monkey wrench into the entire presentation that I just gave you. So in 2014, Senate Bill 310 placed a 2-year freeze on these portfolio standards. So we showed the chart earlier that had the annual benchmarks that the requirements were. They froze those levels at 2014 while a study committee assesses the impact of this policy to Ohio consumers and trying to determine is it good, does it need tweaked. And so the short story is that there was a 2-year freeze. We'll kind of see what happens in the future. The freeze also similarly impacted energy efficiency. So we had the energy efficiency benchmarks. They were also frozen at the 2014 levels, or 4.2%. And then what will happen is assuming that there's no legislative changes, Senate Bill 221 will pick back up in 2017 and then be extended out a couple years. Now with that said, there was a recent draft version of Senate Bill 320 that was introduced last month. And that bill is looking at possibly extending the freeze for an additional 3 years. And there'll be some other changes in that. That story's yet to be written. As mentioned, it's just recently introduced and it's a draft version. So the point is, if you're considering and making these investments, you need to be up to date with these policies because these policies will impact the value of your renewable energy credits in many ways. And net metering as well. Let's look at net metering for a second. So with net metering, how many are familiar with net metering? Okay, a lot more of you are familiar with net metering than you were Senate Bill 221. That's good. Net metering, essentially we're talking about a billing arrangement between you as the owner of a generator and your utility provider, okay? Net metering was originally enacted in Ohio in 1999 as part of the electric restructuring in Senate Bill 3. And originally, the PUCO was requiring that our utilities would compensate system owners that were generating their own electricity at the full retail rate of that energy. It was later determined by the Supreme Court that no, that's illegal, we can't do that, and so they're requiring that they compensate system owners at the unbundled generation rate. That's a big deal, because we need to understand what is the value of that unit of energy, okay? And just take this away. This is the financial side of me talking as we assess these projects. The most valuable energy from a system that you own is the energy you use. Okay? As soon as we start sending energy back and talking about net excess generation, the value of that unit of energy is critically important. And how you're going to be compensated from that can vary depending on which utility you're working with. So talk with your utility providers. They're your partners in these projects, okay? I know we're running a little bit short on time and I want to hit on a couple incentives. So real quickly, this is a slide that's just confirming policy is fluid and it's constantly changing. We're seeing more and more distributed energy systems, home energy systems, and as a result, we're seeing more and more discussion around policies that impacts these projects. This is a summary of the policy actions nationwide from the third quarter of 2015. And as you can see, there's a lot of discussion nationally around net metering policies. The one that really sticks out to me is the second bullet point, fixed charges. 61 utilities in 30 states looking at possibly increasing fixed charges by an average that was requested of 62%. What would that do to you as a system owner? A fixed charge. Most of us on residential around $9, $10, you have that fixed monthly charge, right? Whether you have a system or not, you're going to have that fixed monthly charge. So this is a way that is going, this would minimize the financial return on that investment that you made. So it's something to think about as we look at how quickly can we recover that capital investment. Are we primarily motivated by financial return, or are we primarily motivated by environmental considerations or others? There's different change motivators, so I'm not suggesting that you need to only focus on the economic return, but if that is something that concerns you, it's important to look at because policy can change and it will influence your paybacks. Financial incentives, there's a couple I want to really kind of hit on. The first is the Residential Energy Efficiency Tax Credit. This is a tax credit program that will allow for a maximum of a $500 tax credit for energy efficiency investments in the building envelope between the years of 2011 and expiring at the end of this year. So if you haven't taken advantage of that yet, I encourage you to visit that website, and these will be distributed so you don't have to write down the link there. Also, a residential renewable energy tax credit. This is one that's a little bit confusing because it currently includes a number of different renewable energy technologies. You can see them listed there above, wind, geothermal, fuel cells. However, at the end of this year, all of the other renewable energy technologies, that tax credit expires for those projects. However, for solar, it's extended. So we have a 30% tax credit for solar projects and residential applications extended through the year 2019. And at that point, it starts a slow stair step where I believe it expires in 2021. So we have a little bit of time. That's a good thing. That means you could take a deep breath and really consider your options. You don't have to make a knee-jerk reaction to try and get a project in before a tax credit expires. I mentioned earlier renewable energy credits and how they have value to you as a system owner. This chart just kind of shows how the value of those can change, and I'll summarize it. I mean, what we have is we saw out of the gates, 2009, we had renewable energy credits, or this is specifically looking at solar renewable energy credits, or SRECs. They were trading north of $400 a credit. Now, renewable energy credits they're difficult to understand because there's no set value for them. They're influenced partially by supply and demand. So we talked earlier, there were 14 certified renewable energy facilities in the state of Ohio in 2009. There's not very many SRECs available, right? Because it's based on generation, it's based on production. Well, now there's more than 1,900, so there's more SRECs available. And at the same time, in addition to supply and demand, these projects are influenced by policy. So we had Senate Bill 310 come in and set a freeze on our portfolio standards. So there's some uncertainty in terms of the mandates and what the future may hold. So the value of our credits in today's markets is, last I've heard, still in like the $15 to $25 per credit range. So it's important to think about how these different policy actions could influence the value of renewable energy credits. On the opposite side of that, there's a lot of discussion around the Clean Power Plan. The Clean Power Plan set in place, what do you think that could do to the value of renewable energy credits? I can't say for a fact, but there are some indications that could increase the value of those, because one of the things that the Clean Power Plan was talking about was utilizing renewable energy as part of that plan. So, but the connection between federal regulations and the state policy would need to be ironed out. But once again, it's something that you're going to want to follow. The EcoLink program is a program I see utilized a lot with residential projects in Ohio. Essentially, it's a program through the Ohio Treasury Office that basically is a rate reduction program. So it can offer up to a 3% rate reduction for up to 7 years on a bank loan. So essentially, you work with your bank, you establish a loan, and then from there, your bank fills out some paperwork, submit it. There's no fees associated with it, and then the Treasury Office would compensate them for the rate reduction on the project. The nice thing with this is, at minimum, 50% of it needs to be used for energy efficiency or renewable energy portions of the project, but the other part could be used for other renovations in your home. So it's a nice program for residential applications. And then to kind of wrap up, other incentives. Incentives are difficult because, everyone always asks, well, what grants are available in Ohio? It's kind of a difficult one to ask. And honestly, on the residential side, there's not a lot of grants available, to be real honest. But I encourage you to contact your utility providers. I just kind of did a quick search and found, there's 15 different utilities that popped up on a search that had various incentive programs. So contact your utility providers. A lot of them have really, really good incentive programs, rebate programs for energy efficiency, and then also you're going to want to contact them if you're considering renewable energy as well. You need to you need to work with them so they can help you understand, once again, what the value of that unit of energy will be if you have a net metering agreement. Look at your banks. I'm seeing more and more banks that are coming up with creative programs and getting into the investment game of renewable energy systems. I've seen some that are structured as lease agreements with your bank, where it's kind of off your books. There's no money down. You lease it. They own it. But as the system owner, then they get tax credits and renewable energy credits, and there's options to buy. Those I'm not as familiar with, but I have seen a number of banks that are starting to promote those types of programs. So that may be something else that could be an option for you. I'd check with your financial institutions and see what type of options they have. And then the last note that I'd like to make is property taxes. This is an important piece to investigate. I listed there, I see in the city of Cincinnati and Cleveland, they have programs to exempt residential systems from property taxes. Now on the commercial side, which is once again where I do most of my work with small businesses and specifically in agriculture, they can file paperwork to have those projects exempt from property taxes. But in most cases, it appears that on the residential side, it's going to increase your property taxes. The takeaway I would encourage you to take away from that bullet point: contact your county auditor and discuss it with them. Hey, I'm considering this investment. How is it going to be assessed? And have that discussion ahead of time so that you're not surprised after the fact. If you're interested in learning more about incentives, I encourage you to utilize this site. It's from some of you, it might be hard to see. It's desireusa.org. That's DSIRE USA.org. It's the most comprehensive list of policy overviews and incentives. You can filter it by state. You can filter it by energy efficiency or renewable energy. You can filter it by residential, commercial, agriculture. A number of different, you can filter it by technology. There's a number of different ways you can kind of manipulate this website to really get down to what incentives could apply to your project. It's operated by North Carolina State University with funding from the Department of Energy. So it's an excellent resource if you're interested in learning more about the incentives. And with that, I'll be around all day. My email or cell phone are highlighted in red because if you want to contact me, that's the easiest way to do it. I'm very seldom in my office. So with that,